John, we've had the trade deadline come and go. There weren't a lot of big name players who moved. What do you think of it all?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get a chance to talk about the Yankees, the Mets, and all the teams. I think we've got a lot of errors, not as so many hits. This is a tough deadline, a lot of movement, but not much impact. I think our teams, even though Jazz Chisholm is really the only big name that moved to our teams in New York, I think our teams did okay.
Yeah, well, we'll take a deep dive, talk about how okay or not okay they did. And by the way, how okay and not okay the rest of the league did. We'll play hit and error at the end if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman. John, we've come and gone from another trade deadline. John, I always just want to acknowledge it. Just one of the foremost newsbreakers in the sport. Had just a great day yesterday. We were both up at MLB Network trying to do our thing, and John is always on top of everything that's breaking, and he did a great job again. And as somebody who does it, I have such respect for the hard work it takes to do it well, and John does it so well. John, I thought of it as that this trade deadline was like having an Oscars only for like co-stars, supplementary actors, people who are just like doing cameo walkthroughs. It really missed star power. I think the only two people traded at this deadline who made the All-Star game this year were Tanner Scott and Isaac Paredes. And essentially the Florida teams traded everybody. And that's because those two guys were the only All-Stars from their team. I'm not sure either makes it. If you had to name an All-Star, you just do an all-star team. It was missing stars, and therefore the Mets and Yankees, the two teams were on the most. They both did complementary stuff. Do you compliment them with an eye for what they
Yeah,
did? See what I did there, John?
that was good. Back at you, first of all, great analysis on MLB Network by you. Really terrific. It is funny that I consider the Yankees and Mets both winners with what they did because really, you take the nine guys that they got, three by the Yankees, six by the Mets. And as I said in the post today, if you know five of them, you really are a great baseball fan. I mean, seriously, one of the guys the Mets got, I barely heard of myself, probably because we don't watch Tampa that often. But
Not a big Tyler Zuber guy.
yeah, you guessed it. That was it. And of course, the Mets traded somebody I hadn't heard of to get him. So I'm sure you've heard of all of them, and I credit you for knowing everybody in the league and the AAA league and everything else. So good for you. But I mean, what a weird deadline it is that these two teams are winners with what they did. I will say this, and I wrote about them getting complimentary pieces. Boy, Jazz Chisholm does not look like a complimentary piece right now, right? I mean, he's two home run games, I think, so far. I mean, he only had a 101 OPS plus when he came over from the Marlins, but this is the kind of guy I think is going to respond to being in a pennant race and being before fans. You know, obviously when you're with Miami, and I get it, they sneaked into the playoffs last year, but there's still only two or three people watching the games or whatever. I think this guy's going to respond. So this trade may end up being not a peripheral trade or not a complimentary piece or whatever, or around the margins, whatever we're calling it. I mean, Jazz Chisholm has big talent. He was traded for Zach Gallen to begin with, and he's got power. He's got versatility. He can play infield, outfield. So, you know, let's give the Yankees some love here. They did pretty well.
Let's since we got some time here, let's break them up. Let's start with the Yankees here. So the Chisholm trade is interesting to me because, like you said, this is a play. I mean, I've seen this guy play in person a ton. I think you probably see it in more because of the Miami thing. And, you know, you always feel like you're watching one of the most talented guys on the field when you watch it. The ball comes off his back. You know, he's not a big guy, but like Alfonso Soriano, like when the ball is hit, you're like, wow, there is real carry there to what he's doing. He can obviously run. He's shown already he can defend. He seemed to drift in and out of the games when I would watch him play with the Marlins. Now, does the bright lights in the big city focus him? This first few days have been tremendous. And it reminds me, it's going to be a strange comparison because, you know, Paul O'Neill was an incredibly talented player with the Reds, but he always was frustrating to the Reds that there wasn't more. And then he came to a place that was kind of like maybe better, even though we won a World Series in Cincinnati, maybe a better group that it mattered every day, whatever. He could hide a little bit where there were other stars. I wonder, and the other one, crazy, is like when Jalen Brunson signed with the Knicks, nobody thought he was going to be like, oh, he's a nice player. Or like, what are they
Yeah.
doing? Because this player, if we just lined up everyone in shorts and a t-shirt, John, he would stand out because there's
Right.
nothing he can't do. Can he have the attention span, attention to detail, concentration, consistency that seemed to be lacking in Miami because every
Yeah.
pitch matters here and there's 3,000 people watching the game there?
Yeah, I mean, a couple points. I mean, I do think the question is about maturity. I mean, he came out and had that harangue about Miguel Rojas, and I get Miguel Rojas is a little bit tough. He's a solid veteran guy, and he didn't want the kids acting up on his team, and so he yelled at them on occasion, and it wasn't really the place of Jazz Chisholm to do a podcast or live stream or whatever he did and come out and rip Miguel Rojas. And that may have helped the Yankees because this is the Dodger type of player who can play the infield and the outfield. And they weren't going to get him because they love Miguel Rojas and they can't bring Jazz Chisholm into that. So that probably is the question for me. The talent is there. I think the bright lights will help. The other question to me is the guy should be playing second base. He's a great second baseman. I give him credit for embracing third. He's probably just so happy to be in New York now and be with a team where every game matters that he's like, oh, I'll do it. Let's give him credit because he's doing it. Gleyber Torres would be okay at third. I mean, he's built like a third baseman. He come up as a shortstop. If you play shortstop, and I understand he didn't play at an all-star level, he should be able to play third. I get it. He's in his free agent year, but he's not been great at second. I tell him, you're playing third. That's the way it goes. But they haven't done that yet. I don't know if that's on him or on Boone or whomever. But I mean, it's a waste not to have Chisholm in the middle of the diamond.
Yeah, well, that's no further than 2025 away because I think we understand that Gleyber Torres isn't going to be back. I thought there was a chance they might trade him at this deadline so that
Right.
they could do that. I just think the Yankees have such a third base problem because LeMahieu looks so shot right now. And Oswaldo Cabrera, who's a very good defender, is really a supplementary player who's good to have on a roster, but they needed a third baseman, and they do this. I'm going to bring you back in time because it might have been the first year we covered together, or maybe the second year with the Yankees. Remember, they didn't have a third baseman, the Yankees. They tried Steve Sachs at third base a little bit because they wanted to play Pat Kelly at second, and then they ended
Oh,
up
right.
flip-flopping it where Kelly, because Sachs kind of just showed, I don't want to be doing this. And I think maybe you'd end up in a pennant race with Gleyber Torres doing a version of that where it's like, I just don't want to be doing this. And if you think it's bad at second, what will it be at third? But it is bad at second. I mean, it is bad. There are double plays not turned. There's a
Yeah.
lack of attention to detail. There was a terrible play with him and Volpe the other day up in Fenway where he just kind of like nonchalanted into not, getting the ball. I think they have a Gleyber Torres problem on defense. And
Yeah.
I think they have potentially a solution at third base for 60 games with Chisholm, just because what's the alternative if you're not going to get like Torres's
Yeah.
attention
I
there?
mean, if he just absolutely will not play there and has a really terrible attitude about it, I mean, maybe, I mean, to me, the Yankees are the Yankees. Can't they just tell Gleyber to get over at third base? I mean, he isn't that great at second. I mean, we're not talking about Robbie Alomar at second, right? I think he's a little better than most, and I think the metrics show him as about average, which is a little bit of a surprise having watched him for the entire year because he makes some weird errors. I mean, at the end of the game, right with two outs, he blew an easy grounder, and he seems to nonchalant some, and I get it, but I mean, to me, he looks like a third baseman. He'd probably be fine there, and Jazz is fantastic at second. But hey, let's give them credit on Mark Leiter too. The Leiter, it's all in the family, right? We loved his brother. What a great guy, and we work with his father, and we work with his uncle Al. And I mean, I think the family relationship probably spurred the Yankees to do this in part, and he's having a great year. And it's certainly an upgrade, and their bullpen, they find bullpen pieces, but this is a guy who was actually pitching well with the Cubs.
Yeah, I want to give him a little extra credit also. He showed up and pitched well.
I know, I couldn't
Like
believe it.
a friend of the show, Tommy Pham, kind of did the same thing in St. Louis. He showed up and hit a grand slam in the game.
Yeah,
That's I mean, Leiter essentially was introducing himself to Austin Wells in the game.
I
Again,
couldn't
I'm going to
believe
take
it.
you down memory lane. I know you always think I have a good memory for this. That literally happened with Graham Lloyd and Joe Girardi back in '96, where they had never met. Lloyd got called into the game, and Girardi went out to the mound and essentially said, "What do you know?" And that's how they did it. And like the Yankees
Right,
had a little of that yesterday. Leiter in a runner on second, extra inning
right.
situation comes in. That's going to score points in your clubhouse immediately. And I think both him and you're always better at pronunciation. Am I doing it right? Enyal De Los Santos.
I think that's pretty good.
Yeah,
And you do have a good memory. I mean, that's 28 years ago. You can
yeah. I
remember a
wrote a book about
conversation.
the. Wrote a book
Uh,
about the '96
yeah,
Yankees, so it's someplace in the crevices back there. But the Yankees needed to add strikeout ability to the back end of their
right.
bullpen. I think they went into yesterday 19th in the majors in strikeout percentage out of the bullpen, like 22%. Leiter's up at about 33%. De Los Santos is about 28%. They needed to miss more bats. Leiter is actually really good against lefties. One thing to keep in mind with Caleb Ferguson not working out and Victor Gonzalez, 2 trades with the Dodgers not working out, they're down to Tim Hill as the lefty in their bullpen. And like you mentioned, the Yankees do well. Like Tim
Yeah,
Hill, Jake Cousins, Michael Tonkin, who kind of helped save them last night, winning a game.
right.
They find bullpen and they make the most of it. So I think they needed to inject that into their bullpen, which is swing and miss.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Tim Hill. He was with the White Sox and he was terrible with the White Sox. And people
Right.
over there tell me it's about the positioning and whatever. And the Yankees probably saw that and took advantage. And he's done well so far. I mean, we shall see. But they do find guys and they're excellent at it. But I do want to put a punctuation mark on that point for Mark Leiter. I mean, give him credit. I know he's from Toms River, which is basically Philadelphia, but still. I mean, to get there and play, and Tommy Pham, friend of the show, I mean, to go back to St. Louis, got that standing ovation. It was really great. A lot of teams were interested. Tommy Pham is doing okay, not great this year, but some people may not love the fact that he's so spicy and great, and we do. We love him, and there are teams that love it. And St. Louis knew him, and they, at the end they had a little bit of a falling out over some contractual thing, and they disregarded it. And good move by St. Louis, and Pham got there and hit the grand slam. I thought that was great.
Tommy Pham has been traded 5 times at the deadline 4 times, and in all the last 3 deadlines, he's been traded. John, let's quickly move to the other team in town, who are the Mets. This is the thought I had about them. They had their 2015 trade deadline minus Yoenis Cespedes. Like that kind of player wasn't available, but they got a version of like Uribe, Kelly Johnson, Addison Reed, and Tyler Clippard. 4 guys who really helped that team win a pennant that year. So the question is, do they already kind of have Yoenis Cespedes in this core group of hitters who are pretty good,
And
plus now Jesse Winker, who should help? Like, did they do enough when they're trying to thread this needle of, hey, we want to get to the playoffs, but we absolutely don't want to mess up anything 2025 going forward?
yeah, I mean, I got to credit you on the memory there. I know that's only 9 years ago, but that's a long time from my memory anyway.
Yeah.
So good job on that. I mean, look, even AJ Preller didn't come up with a superstar, right? I mean, Tanner
Yeah.
Scott's a very good pitcher. I do think he deserves to be on the All-Star team, by the way. He hasn't given up a run since June 13th, but he's not a superstar. Flaherty's a very good pitcher, but he's not a superstar. I mean, Vlad Guerrero was not traded. Pete Alonso was not traded. Of course, that's the other way. But the great pitchers were not traded. Snell stayed where he is. Crochet stayed where he is. Also, Luis Robert among the hitters stayed where he is. Basically all the superstars stayed. And, you have AJ Preller willing to offer any prospect that he's got, and still nobody was able to pry any of those guys away. Skubal too, I should mention. So those guys weren't moving to anybody, even the obvious World Series contenders. So I'm not going to kill the Mets for not coming up with a big star. They understood what the issue was. It's in the bullpen. The vast majority of the guys that they did get, the half dozen guys, are bullpen pieces, and probably a few of them will work out nicely. We shall see. Stanek and Maton have already pitched a few times. Maton doing well. So I think they did the right thing. I mean, I know I've been patting myself on the back for predicting they're going to make the playoffs, but the fact remains they're only half game in front at this point, right? I should stop patting myself on the back. It's not a guarantee. They don't look like a World Series contender, though you never know. If you come in sixth the last 2 years in the National League, you did get in the World Series. Arizona and Philly the year before did that. So it is possible to make the World Series coming in sixth. I like the fact that they went out and did a lot, got a bunch of pieces for the position that they absolutely needed. Their rotation is deeper than most still, even with the injuries that they've suffered recently, and that lineup much deeper than most. And I still think they're going to make it, but no guarantee because Arizona's doing better, San Diego's doing better. National League is not. We thought it was going to be easy, right? National League versus American League. National League is just as good as the American League there for looking for that 4, 5, and 6 spot.
Yeah, and I think 4, 5, and 6 are all open. We probably spent, I started about 6, 7
Right.
weeks ago saying I think the Braves are vulnerable, and I think they are vulnerable. I don't think that they're guaranteed. And by the way, I don't
Nope.
think the Braves think they're guaranteed. I think that
Nope.
they think they're in a iffy situation this year. John, just to finish it up is just I had one other thought on the Mets as they were doing this. If Adrian Hauser went out instead of Paul Blackburn, would anyone notice the difference? Like, aren't they the same guy?
Well, I don't know.
Didn't they just reacquire Adrian Hauser and it's just
Well, they're
called
giving him a
Paul
shot.
Blackburn?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Hey, look, I got to give them credit. The moves that they made, other than Adrian Hauser, Bader, Severino, Minaya. I mean, look at the game that Minaya pitched, and I love Minaya, by the way. I ride back on the train with him sometimes. He's a fantastic guy, and he's been a great pitcher for them. I'm not sure he hates it.
Diekman, Wendell.
Those are the margins. Those are $1
yeah.
or $2 million, right? I mean, he didn't do great with the 1 or 2 million, although Tyrone Taylor's done well. He's a fine fourth outfielder. But the bigger moves, I mean, they spent $1 billion before he got there. They spent under 100 million with the guys that they got. Severino, Minaya, Bader, those are the 3 biggest moves. They've all worked.
Yeah, they worked really well. If you stick with the show with Jon Heyman and Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman, you should get top billing. You did so well yesterday. We're going to do it that way.
No.
We'll talk about who did well and not so well around the major leagues. John, every team made a trade of some sort at this deadline. Who did you get? Let's start with. Let's be nice. It's not our rep. Well, you do one you like, I'll do one I like. You go first.
Yeah, I'm going to give the Marlins some love. We never do that on the show. And you know what? I was questioning whether they knew what they were doing when they traded Arise and came up with a 19-year-old outfielder named Dylan Head, who has been injured, and not much else. And they had a fantastic deadline, I do believe. I thought they did great coming up with 18 prospect, Connor Norby and Stowers, for Trevor Rogers, who was really a back-end pitcher for the Marlins. So I thought that was a great trade. Obviously, the Tanner Scott, they took advantage of the fact that Fairbanks and Finnegan stayed where they are, and that A.J. Preller probably owed them one from the Arise trade, and ended up getting Snelling, who's now the number 2 prospect of the Marlins, Mazur Paulie, who started the year in the majors. So they got guys who are close to the majors, not 19-year-old kids, and they got some really, really good ones, really rebuilt that farm system, which is what you have to do if you're the Marlins general manager. And so I thought that they did a very, very nice job in Miami.
So I'll go to the absolute other end of the spectrum when you think of teams. I'm going to give the Dodgers a thumbs up here, because I think what the Dodgers were trying to do is the Dodgers know they've won the NL West already, and they're going to be either the 1 or the 2 seed. So they're not playing for the rest of this year. They're playing for what makes them the best in the postseason. And they tried, I think, pretty hard for Crochet and Skubal. And for the various reasons that those guys didn't move, they didn't get that kind of guy. Jack Flaherty, as you and I know, and our friend Ken Rosenthal actually wrote it, there was some real questions. The Yankees had talked from what I understand, had talked quite seriously about doing a deal. They talked about players. There was some questions in the physical review, and the Yankees wouldn't do the best of the group that the Tigers wanted. The Tigers wouldn't do the deal without the best of the group, and I think they moved on. I think the Dodgers are in position to get the Yankees, because of their thin farm system, were not in position, therefore, to take that risk, because it would probably have meant like maybe trading Nestor Cortez or something. And now if Flaherty goes down, what do you get? I think the Dodgers can roll those dice. They didn't give up anything at the top of their farm system. So they get Flaherty, who could start a playoff game for them, right? Glasnow, Yamamoto, him, maybe Kershaw. We'll see who it ends up being. And then I just think they fortified. I think the middle of the diamond defensively, Tommy Edman, when he's healthy, and Kiermaier really are good defenders still, even at an advanced age. And if any team was going to take a gamble on Michael Kopech's big arm, and I think there's other areas that I wonder about with Kopech, but with his big arm, it would be a team, again, that knows it's going to be in the postseason and will take a shot at it. So I actually like what the Dodgers did. How about
Yeah, I'm going to just comment on that. Yeah, I agree with you. They were going for impact, and they got the best starting pitcher available. I understand there's apparently a back situation with him, but we're talking about a rental player. We're not giving a guy a 10-year deal, right? It's not a Carlos Correa situation. And certainly the Dodgers have taken risks with guys who've had injuries or have something on their medical before. And, it's worth the risk because that's exactly who they needed. And that's the only pitcher that's really who's starting pitcher who's actually traded, who's actually going to make their playoff rotation, provided they have other guys who are healthy as well. So I'm with you on the Dodgers.
Flip it over, John. Give me one you didn't like all that much.
It's a team that I think does a fantastic job, and they obviously draft extremely well, and they are a World Series contender. But and again, there weren't great players traded, right? I mean, other than Flaherty and Tanner Scott, I don't think there was a really great player traded in this whole thing. But I kind of felt like the Orioles could have done more with the prospects that they do have. I mean, Trevor Rogers, he's got more potential than he's shown in Miami, and maybe they think they can get it out of him. Maybe. But they give up Connor Norby for him. And I get they're bringing up Jackson Holliday, who's much better than Connor Norby, we think, right? So I get it. They got so many great prospects. They don't know what to do with them. But, it was clearly the biggest seller's market we've ever seen. So all these trades are going to look lopsided. The Toronto-Houston trade for Kikuchi, they all look a little bit lopsided. So if you're a buyer, you're going to be on the wrong end of some of these trades. But I also thought it was weird. Didn't they make 2 trades with Philadelphia? I mean, to me, those are the 2 World Series favorites. They're going to play each other after they're like in love with each other. They can't get away from each other. So I didn't love that, but I'm an old school. I don't love fraternizing on the field either. And this is like that form of fraternizing on the field. It's fraternizing in the front offices.
John, I'm with you. I actually think the best thing about the Yankee deadline is the Orioles didn't have a good deadline. They did
get Eflin. They did get Eflin.
I like Eflin, but like if he shows up in a playoff game, it isn't like he's going to quake your boots. Kind of thing, and he's good. He's going to start a playoff game for them.
Right.
Trevor Rogers feels like the kind of guy you get in the off season, and he's like a fix-it guy for a good annual.
Right.
The Phillies added 2 relievers. They got the 2 relievers, the Orioles, that the Phillies wanted off their team when they're building, with the best record in the National League. So, and Eloy Jimenez feels like a salary dump with the White Sox. Now, it's a crazy, anything can happen in 50, 60 games. It could do it. Let me tell you one that I'm going to get. There's someone I hated more, but I'm going to save it for hitting error.
Hated is a strong word. Hey, that's a strong word. All right.
Well, I'll tell you one that I didn't like is like the Twins, I think, had to protect themselves with a starting pitcher, even if it was like an Alex Cobb level pitcher who went to Cleveland.
Yeah.
Because Paddock kind of looks like he's hit a wall. Simeon Woods-Richards is going to get up near innings he hasn't pitched before, just to kind of, they're borderline whether they're getting in the playoffs or not. Don't they have to at least get a passable starting pitcher in the Alex Cobb mode, the Kikuchi mode, somebody else just to take as good a shot to make the playoffs as possible?
What happened to Tyler Anderson? I mean, guy's got a same ERA as Flaherty, right? 2.95. I know that
save it. That might show up in hitting error.
All right. Well, the metrics, I guess, were not great on him. I don't know what it was, but somebody like that. There are other guys who are available, right? The Colorado, I know they don't trade many guys, but they have 2 starting pitchers, Gomber and Quantrill. They didn't go anywhere. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you. I'm a loath to criticize the Twins, but for I guess middle market, I think they do very well generally. Very well. And, they have 3 great players who are frequently hurt. They could be a great team. Now, they're never going to beat the Yankees. I don't care if Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig are on that team. They're still going to, obviously, those are Yankees, but they're never going to beat the Yankees. For whatever reason, they got a thing with the Yankees. But you got Royce Lewis. I mean, you got Buxton. You got Correa. If they're healthy and on the field, I mean, there isn't a team that's got 3 better position players than that. I mean, the Dodgers are pretty good, obviously, but That's pretty good, and they're clearly a threat. The health is their question more than anything. All teams did something. They did get Trevor Richards, as you mentioned. Was it enough? We'll see.
Yeah, you mentioned no one has three better position players. I don't know. The Yankees have Ruth and Garrett right now
Yes, they
in
do.
Judge and Soto, and they might have just acquired Earl Combs with Jazz Chisholm. So anyway, we are probably going to go even a little deeper here if you stick with us on the show with John Heyman. John Heyman, I did it again. Joel Sherman and Jon
I
Heyman. You had such a
appreciate
good day yesterday. Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman. We'll do play hit and error and wrap it up. John, let's play hit or error here.
I'm going to give my error to the total deadline. I felt like I was working hard, and you were working hard, and we were all working hard. It was frantic and frenzied and all that, but there were no superstars traded. We talked all the time about Skubal and Snell and Crochet and Robert, Vlad, even Pete. And the best two players traded are a reliever, Tanner Scott, a good one, and Jack Flaherty, a solid, very more than solid starting pitcher. So I guess at least my friends tell me this deadline was a dud. I'll have to take their word for it because I can't see the forest through the trees. I'm right in the middle of things, so I don't know. I didn't think it was that bad, but everybody's texting me how boring it was, so I'll take their word for it.
Yeah, no doubt. I'll say conversely, it's not my hit or error. Conversely, I think it was jammed to some degree for a variety of reasons. One is that the six playoff teams in each league and more teams are in it. And I actually hey, create a better team until July 30th. Because I kind of like where especially the NL wild card is going. I think it's going to make a interesting last 2 months. So I kind of like that. My error is what's up with the Angels? They're not a very good baseball team. They're not going to be a very good baseball team anytime soon, in part because whatever's going on with Mike Trout, he can't get on the field. Anthony Rendon is just going to be dead money moving forward. So they have those two guys on their payroll moving forward. This was a market screaming for positional help, for bats. Luis Rengifo, is his value ever going to be more valuable to the Angels than seeing if you can get things and kick it forward a little bit and play for the future? Ward, why isn't he traded? Why isn't Tyler Anderson traded when people need, as you point out, starting pitching? It just felt like, are they trying to win 77 instead of 72? I don't quite fathom how they were not incredibly active yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly get it. And Rendon and Trout are 40% of their payroll. That's quite a lot. And they don't look like they're going to be able to play going forward. I mean, Trout, to me, it's unbelievable. He had a meniscus cleanup. Now, it's not me. It would take me probably 3 years to get back from meniscus cleanup. But Djokovic, and I'm a tennis fan, 3.5 weeks later, he's in the finals of Wimbledon with the same injury and the same operation. We're on 14 weeks for Trout. I mean, you never know with somebody's body how he reacts or whatever. I'm not going to question his heart or anything like that, but it's unbelievable that and we know Rendon, I mean, he basically came out and said he doesn't like baseball at the beginning. So when you say you don't like baseball and then you're not playing ever, that's a bad look. So I'm going to give them a thumbs down. What do we call an error? I'm going to add my second error on those two. I'll give the Angels, I don't want to say a pass, but at least Ward and Rengifo and Anderson have a year to go, right? They're still with the team. There were teams that had rentals. Elias Diaz, a catcher. Now I understand most of the good teams have catchers already. Somebody must have wanted Elias Diaz, right? And there's nobody. You couldn't find one taker for Elias Diaz. I can't imagine you give him the qualifying offer, right? And hasn't Colorado done this before? They had a player that they was Gray, right? John Gray. My memory only goes back 3 years. Yours goes back 28. But remember, they didn't give him they didn't trade him, and then they didn't give him the qualifying offer. That makes no sense. They should have traded him. So I gave out two errors. I guess it was a bad deadline. I mean, we're giving out errors left and right here.
It was a bad deadline for the teams, a great deadline for Jon Heyman. So it was well done, John. Also, as always, well done, Tommy Hogan, Jake Brown, our producers. Don't forget to watch the New York Post YouTube page to view this. Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. download us, give us a rating, give us a review. And John, we've now cleared the last important date during the regular season. All we got is baseball now to the end. These are essentially the teams we're going to see. I hope everyone sticks with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman to listen to the end of the season. Thanks.